This is the grip cap that goes on that 100, and I had the camera all set up a while ago before I started this, and I forgot to hit the record switch. So this is the second coat of bluing. I use Birchwood Casey, either Super Blue or Perma Blue. After your steel is prepped and ready to blue, you have to, as far as sanding goes, buffing, you have to degrease it. I use lacquer thinner. You can use acetone or maybe even denatured alcohol, but it's got to be degreased. There's grease on, if you've touched it, there's grease on it because there's oil in our skin. So after you get it prepped and degreased, then just follow the instructions. It's on the bottle. And you take a cotton ball. You don't dip it with this back in the solution. You got to throw that one away. Take a cotton ball, wet it, saturate it pretty good without touching the surface you're going to blue. Rub it over it pretty good. Once you get it rubbed on there, let it sit for, I don't know, a couple minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and then you wash that off. You're gonna wash it off with water. This is water soluble, and you don't want it to keep doing what it's doing, because bluing is a form of rust, and if you just left that on there all night, you come in the next day and it'll be orange with rust. So you rinse this off with water. Rinse it off real good with a wet rag, water, running water, cold water, and then you buff it with steel wool, 4/0, or bronze wool. And I'll be right back. We'll talk about why. I have rinsed it off with water, cold, clean water, and I took a air compressor, compressed air, and blew it off. Now I'm going to take steel wool. And the reason you might want to use bronze wool, a gunsmith told me this many years ago, steel wool comes out of the package with oil on it. They put oil on it at the factory so that by the time you get it at Ace Hardware, it's not rusted. It keeps it from rusting. So there's a little bit of oil in steel wool. The reason you use bronze wool is it comes without oil. So you're not saturating your stuff with oil every time you pick up a bronze wool and piece of it and start doing what you're doing. That's the advantage of bronze wool. You're buffing this. I think on the instructions here it says you're burnishing it actually. But you buff it off. Now the backside won't show, but I blew it anyway to go ahead and stop it from rusting. Blue, when you blue something, it's a form of rust, and it stops it from rusting anymore, is the idea. Matter of fact, there's a process called rust bluing where you actually rust it, and then you buff that off and you rust it again. You put the solution on, put it in a warm, wet environment, damp, and you cook it off for a few hours and you bring it back out, and it's just orange with rust, completely orange. You think you've ruined it, and then you buff it off with it's a soft wire brush. They call it a card. You card it off. The first time I heard about rust bluing that way, I just could not imagine how you could turn rust into blue until I went down, sat with a friend of mine most of the day, and we blued some rifles. And once I saw it, I understood how it worked. But rust is just a form of blue, and you're stopping the rusting process when you saturate all the carbon molecules that are all up close to the surface, on the surface, with this formula. You go ahead and they react with that, and then when you put oil on it, it stops it from rusting. So it's a rust that won't go any further, if that makes any sense. Now, because I've used steel wool, I've got oil on it, I've got to degrease it again. This is the third coat, which the bottle says you can do 2 coats and leave it, or you can do 3. But I'm going to degrease this again with lacquer thinner and try not to touch it with my fingers after I've degreased it. Let that dry. Then you come back, put the last coat on it. With every coat, it picks up a few more carbon molecules, and it reacts with them, and it keeps those from being available for rust to form, the kind of rust we don't like.